the OG herself of Muizenberg, Bernie Shelly.
This is really just a Muizenberg, please.
But you are like one of the coolest elderly, we don't say elderly, oldest female surfers in the South African surf community, let's face it. But
No, okay, I'm the oldest. You can say it.
Bernie Shelly, it's an absolute treat to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
I'm flattered.
So let's go. Let's talk about Bernie and your journey as not only a surfer, but as a mother. When did you start surfing? What was your first interaction that said to you, like, the ocean is where I want to spend most of my time?
Well, that would have been a long way along the line. The first time I ever came across surfboards was in 1964 at Glen Beach. I was just walking on the beach and there were these guys out on these things. I didn't know they were surfboards. I mean, who did back in 64 in South Africa? And I asked one of the guys if I could have a turn, and I paddled out, and that was that. It wasn't like an epiphany, a moment of great light. It just happened. In fact, most of my surfing has just happened. It hasn't been that great moment ever. It's just who I became from that moment.
So at that point, 1964, you say, how old were you then?
17.
Sorry.
No, I'm ancient. I'm 76.
Wow. Phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, I was 17. So 64, 65 was sort of my first summer, my first riding on surfboards. I borrowed a board from, just either Jeff Fish or one of those guys from Sea Point, the Gremlins they were called.
Okay.
Or it might have been Roger Parman.
Okay.
The older Roger Parman, Johnny Parman's uncle.
Oh, okay.
Johnny's a bit younger than me. Johnny's got a Roger Parman brother who's younger than him.
But another Roger.
Another Roger, yeah. My sort of first surfer boyfriend, I suppose. Yeah, and then the guys invited me around to come and see where they built surfboards in Jeff's parents' garage.
Okay.
And
do you remember the what they called those boards?
Gremlins.
Okay.
Yeah. They had this, Eddie Scarpa was the guy who did the artwork, and this really grotty-looking gnome guy with sticking up hair and flies all around him and all that was. If I'd known, I would have brought a picture of it. Just to show.
You can send it to me and we can pop it up on the screen when I edit.
Okay.
He used to walk around with flies following him.
Yeah, not Eddie. The guy, the little decal.
Oh, the decal.
Oh.
I was picturing some dude who hadn't bathed for a few weeks with these flies buzzing around him. Okay, the Gremlins.
Yeah, the Gremlins, yes.
Wow. There's something in my mind that's saying to me, I've seen this somewhere, this logo.
You might have. Alan, my husband's got a surfboard with a modernish surfboard.
Yes.
With the Gremlin decal on it. I'll take a photo of it and see what it is.
Gremlins.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
And where was their shaping bay? In Muses?
No, in Sea Point,
Okay.
in Jeff Fisher's parents' garage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I dare say in 64, 65, the boards back then were like logs, long boards, single fins, that's it.
Absolutely. Built-in fins as well. We called them skegs.
Yes.
Didn't call them fins.
Skegs.
And heavy. I can't tell you the figures, but they were heavy. They were very heavy boards. Yeah, not like the modern logs are actually relatively light. You know, they're heavier than other boards, but they're relatively light.
So what were you doing back then, Bernie? Were you finishing school? Did you have any sort of aspirations from wanting to become, I don't know, a nurse or a chef, or what was your...
I actually wanted to become either a journalist or a vet, mainly a vet. But it wasn't to be. I had a very chauvinistic stepdad who women don't get educated, and it was a whole whatnot. Yeah, so I just did various things. I was a clerk. I sold encyclopedias. I did various things like that. It was only later on, years later, that I actually went back to varsity and I studied psychology and English lit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely just a surfer babe. You know, I got a little bit of what left. I haven't got much of it left now, but
Well, you mentioned when we were chatting earlier about a book that you've written, so we'll get on to that. But I dare say that's where your journalism is, and your yearning for wanting to pen your thoughts and life experiences is now kind of finally coming to fruition later on in life.
well, I did write magazine articles for quite a few years.
Okay.
You know, I lectured in psychology and occasionally in English as well. And then I got a bit tired. The surfing sort of got in the way of schedules, and I didn't want to be with schedules anymore. So I started writing articles, surfer magazines, gardening, animals, which is my other little passion. Yeah, so I sort of dabbled with that as well.
You see, we're slowly getting that bucket deeper down the well that is Bernie Shelley, that we're peeling back the layers. Okay, so you mentioned surfing magazines, like which surfing magazines?
They've sadly enough, actually, funnily enough, I've done for a couple of for internationals. What is the one was a German one, and the buggers never paid me. And then other was, it was, I don't know if you're allowed to say that.
Yes, we can.
And what was it? Something with a longboard.
Long.
Pacific, Pacific longboard. Yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Okay, cool.
Um,
And any for surfer magazine itself?
I did. They did. They were interested in an article that I wrote, but they'd closed for that year.
Oh, right. Okay.
And then they said resubmit, and I never did.
Okay. Sure. This was pre all this social media nonsense and pre-digital.
Absolutely.
Everything was in that magazine. You waited for that magazine every month,
For that magazine.
and that article may have been written months before.
In fact, almost a year before had I got in time.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway,
So that's an interesting thing for the younger generation, you know. Surfer Magazine, which was a very popular magazine around the world, you'd get it once a month and there'd be articles in there, which could have been one of your articles because you were a writer at the time or a journalist, which would have been written a year before you actually read it. The reason I say this is because we live in such a
past, yeah.
It has to be now, you know, it has to be now, and it has to be on trend now. But to think that an article could have been written a year before you actually get it is quite amazing. It just tells you something about time, right?
Yeah, and tells you also something about a problem that we're actually living in.
Right.
There's everything too fast. People can't focus anymore. It is actually quite a problem. Never mind AI, there's just that simple thing and there's research has shown now that people are not able to focus for very long.
You're right. And this is coming from a psychologist, so we have to pay attention here, folks.
Quite a psychologist.
Well, you lectured in psychology, didn't
I
you?
majored in psychology and then I lectured.
Well, you majored in psychology, so that's enough to...
Yeah, no, I realized I couldn't become I haven't got that right sort of patience.
Okay.
I want to say to people, just get on with it, man. You know, you can't do that. No, you just can't be like that.
Okay, so let's go back to Bernie. So you've got kids, I assume?
I've got 4 kids and 8 grandkids.
How did you juggle your early career with your, by this point, obsession with surfing in the ocean and now 4 children? How did you do that?
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't surf for 25 years.
Okay.
After I had look, I'm from a different generation. men in my generation didn't look after babies while their wives were out surfing. So I didn't surf for that period. I only started surfing again when my youngest child, it was my son, when he was about 10.
Okay.
So that was a 25-year gap that I had. And I started taking him surfing. And I didn't actually note, there probably were women surfing, but I didn't notice any. And I borrowed a huge, big old board that my cousin had stored away in his garage. And I started surfing, funnily enough, at Big Bay. And then I was at Komaki at Innerkom one day, and Barbara Moyer, Matthew Moyer's mom, said to me, "Hey, come join us, come join the Western Province fraternity," which I did. And then I got into to competitive surfing and so on. Yeah, so, yeah, but those days of having kids, I didn't juggle. I get other things, and I juggled their activities, but I didn't surf. I played squash and so on.
I think the word is sacrifice. You sacrificed in a positive sense.
Yeah.
You lovingly sacrificed time away from one of your passions. And I think the reason I'm saying this is because there's a lot to be learned from that, and to be admired from a focus on your children, even though you may have wanted to go surfing, and I'm sure there were times, right?
Yeah, well, yes. Look, that was all when shortboarding. I never shortboarded because I missed that whole period. When I went back to surfing, longboarding had come back in again.
So you'd missed that whole
I missed that
twins
the whole-
onto to thrusters, and then like,
all that stuff.
and it went full circle back to, yeah. You probably even kept your bell bottoms, and then like they're back in fashion.
Yeah, funnily enough, yeah. And there are loads of things that I've still got that I wear that were from the 60s.
Exactly.
70s.
Circular. It's all circular, right? That's interesting. So you,
Look, it wasn't ever a sacrifice. I know what you mean. You don't mean sacrifice, but I tend to be, I won't say obsessive, but I do tend to get into things. Like I was very into mothering and so on. And I'm proud of what I did. I mean, I know even an ant can have babies, but not even an ant can do well in bringing up the successful, good people.
yes.
So yeah, so I'm happy with that, and it didn't matter that I didn't surf because there's always, there's always tomorrow. You don't have to do it today, tomorrow, and it worked out beautifully.
Yeah. And so in those 25 years, as you say, we went through from longboards and then, so back in those days, were you familiar with some of the, those seminal characters in South African surf heritage? We think of John Whitmore. Were you friends with that fraternity?
Absolutely. John, in fact, lives in Camps Bay, or he was actually in Buckhaven. And he was very encouraging, very, very much so.
Yes. Let me just move this. It's tickling your head, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was very good to us. There were just a few of us. There was me and Therese, Margaret Smith, and there were others. Therese and I were on this side of the mountain, the Atlantic seaboard people. And then on the other side were Margaret Smith and Linda Leviton and Nola Miller, and I can't think of them all now, but yeah. But yeah, there weren't many, and John was very, as I say, very encouraging.
Did you ever spend any time at his house having socials?
Not parties. We were a lot younger than him,
Yes.
In fact, his kids were my generation, Peter and so on. And my son and Peter's sons were born a day apart. They were friends. And my youngest daughter and John Whitmore's daughter were very good friends together. Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a little connection there, besides surfing,
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Dickie Metz?
Yes. Yes. He. In fact, then we went to the Whitmore's daughter's house, Peter Bergveld, and he interviewed us, and I took Nola along with me as representative of, and in fact, talking about meeting people, at some stage, and this came out at the Dickey interview, Joyce Hoffman, who was the world champ then, and there weren't that many world champs back then. It was relatively
Female world champs.
yeah, underpaid, but never mind. That's another story.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, she came over here, and for some reason I can't remember why. John must have been John who asked. I don't remember these things. Us to take her up to Durban. So, a friend, Peter Shelly, his name was, and Stephanie Richard and I took Joyce up to Durban to pick up a Triumph, really snazzy little sports car that they had sponsored her.
Oh, wow.
That was quite a thing when I think back now.
So you did a road trip with the old world champ.
With the world, yeah.
Did you go? You obviously went up the coast and surfed along the way?
Yeah. Along J-Bay.
Bay, wherever.
I can't remember if we went to Vic Bay, but we went to St. Francis, J-Bay, which were really just opening up.
Yes.
At that stage. So that was quite a...
That would have been early 70s, eh? Or late?
No, late 60s. It was about 66, 67 maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So everyone was still camped in the Milkwoods there.
Yes, absolutely. No, it was amazing. We used to go off on surf trips and not even think about accommodation.
Yeah. You must have bumped into guys like Des Sawyer and Glenda Arcee. Apparently he was camped in the Milkwoods there for a while.
Oh, they were slightly younger than me.
He was saying to me the Aussies that used to camp, they were quite innovative. They used to take car inner tubes and sew them together for booties.
Really?
Yes, yeah.
Good grief, no. I didn't know that. We didn't have wetsuits in those very early days, yeah.
So the guys would surf J-Bay just in shorts and longboards. Yeah. That's it.
Never mind that, that's fine. Surf Glen Beach and Long Beach in just baggies,
Is that
bikinis.
what you used to do?
Yeah.
Wow. There we go, guys.
Yeah, no, it used to be frozen for hours afterwards.
Brilliant. Now, that must have been a cool experience, being able to spend time with Joyce. Joyce Hoffman. Wow. Fun memories, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. At the time, I probably didn't think it was much of a deal. When you're living through things, you often don't realize their importance at the time. You just go with it. Only when you think back, you think, oh, did that really happen?
Yeah. And what other cool core memories do you have about those early days of surfing for you? Do you have any more little gems? Maybe people that you met, time that you spent, certain surf breaks that had an impression on you?
Well, yeah. There was J-Bay and Bruce's.
What was it like getting there? And had the Endless Summer already, Bruce Brown's film already been shown? Had you seen it?
Not yet. We saw it later. And in fact, talking about Bruce Brown movies, in those early years, John Whitmore used to import movies, but they were the old 8mm or whatever they were. Cine, yeah. And he used to hire a hall out in Mowbray. Can't remember what's it called now, on Leesbeck Parkway.
Okay.
And we used to go there on Sunday nights, and they were all the surfers used to somehow find out about them. They used to sit in these chairs, like these church type chairs, and everybody used to make a hell of a noise. And then we used to watch these. There was Endless Summer that eventually came out. There was Barefoot Adventure, Log Jammed, and no, we didn't see Gidget. No, that was commercial. These weren't commercial at all. These were real surfer, more underground, yeah. And they were all very humorous. And we used to have, great laughs. And then at interval, you'd go out and have tea, and you'd all sit with your cup of tea, and you didn't dare leave your saucer open, because everybody used to put their cup when they were finished. That used to be the usual funny hijinks. Yeah, but we were quite naive. It wasn't. We didn't have internet, obviously, but
Yes.
yeah, we used to, in order to decide whether to go to Muizenberg side or Long Beach side or whatever, we used to mostly do a peninsular tour. You used to go to used to drive. If you saw somebody smoke, then you'd see which way the wind was blowing. Then you'd have a bit of an idea.
You didn't have magic seaweed or surfline or Spike's forecasts.
That's right.
It was literally just watching the mountain, watching yeah. Interesting. And so let's try and, like, what was it like arriving in a place like St. Francis? I dare say did you surf Bruce's at the time?
At the time, yes, we did. We did. But as I say, at the time, you don't realize the significance of what you're experiencing.
Yes.
It was as cool and wonderful an experience as just being there, just going on the trip, just having a surfboard. It wasn't. Now I wish I could relive it so that I could experience it with the fullness of knowing what it was, knowing
it's going to become, and
it's going to become, yeah.
And how historic. Yeah, I suppose, like you say, no one was there, none of those houses. No. There was no commercial realization of just how important these wave spots were going to be.
What surfing was going to become.
But surely you felt like, wow, these are really good waves.
Yeah, but still to this day, yes, I know now what a good wave is, and probably did know what a good wave was then. But I often listen to people who have surfed less often, who are not as experienced, and they go, yeah, it was so super. And you look at the wave and you think, no, man, come on, that's crap. That's not crap. You don't even know what a decent wave is if you think that that's good wave. So what I'm saying is, back then, maybe I didn't know what a good wave was either.
Got you.
When you're inexperienced and
yes.
And it was all just the fun of it.
Yes.
Being free and
yeah, just going with the flow at the time.
Yeah, always.
Did you stay in tents or what?
No, just sort of under the car or in the car or.
You said you just didn't have any accommodation. You just
we just used to go. You could do that then.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, even here in Cape Town, we used to sleep at Kumiki at the where the grass is.
Yes.
There where the benches are.
Yeah.
Just slept there.
On a sleeping bag or something?
On a sleeping bag.
Blanket, mattress, make a little fire.
Mattresses.
Food?
Yeah. I suppose we must have eaten.
You can't remember whether they...
Now plan absolutely everything. Breakfast.
Yes, that's it.
And then lights for this, and then you'll have a shower, and we better take this.
And how nutritional the meal's going to be. And back in those days, it was like a tin of beans and like banana and go surf.
That's right. Exactly that.
Sure.
Yeah, we used to go up to Elands Bay, and we used to stay in some grotty little house that some farmer guy used to let us. And it was full of fleas. You used to walk across the floor and all these fleas jumped on you. But for eating, we used to go to the crayfish factory.
Yes.
And they'd give us all the legs and stuff, and we used to have these big cans that we used to boil the legs and have a thing of no, just boil them quickly.
Yes.
And just have a thing of mayonnaise and just eat these legs till you were full.
Of crayfish legs.
Of crayfish legs.
Sure. Times were tough back then.
Tough, very tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like good times, eh? And so through the years of you getting back in the water, I mean, you're pretty much part of the furniture down at Muizenberg these days. You're there encouraging the younger female surfers just by your presence and your being there. How have you gotten more involved, and how would you say, if you were to sort of like an out-of-body kind of like viewpoint on you as a personality and as a character within the female surfing community, how have you helped encourage and shape it, and what would you like to see happening in the future to keep growing the sport and the discipline and just the art of surfing? amongst females?
Well, I don't think that I ever considered myself a pioneer or think of myself as encouraging young girls and so on. But I think it did happen. And how I realized this was just recently. My son-in-law sent me a little video of one of my grandkids, granddaughters, playing soccer. And I sort of wrote back and, well, that was a good move. She did it so well. And I loved soccer so much. But back when I was young, we didn't have soccer clubs for girls and all. And then he said, yeah, but it's because of people like you that these girls have got soccer clubs and all nowadays. And it sort of maybe was like that with surfing as well, because there were a few of us who put ourselves out, not intending to, we were just doing it. And I suppose that younger girls would have seen it and wanted to do it too. We lived then, back in the 60s, very Calvinistic South Africa then.
Yes.
So sort of walking around in a bikini and in those days also the first round of mini skirts and so on. We were sort of frowned upon by certain people, obviously not by in amongst surfers and so on, but certainly amongst certain people we were frowned upon.
Yes.
But that didn't matter. And what evolved from that, same as the women who were fighting for voting rights and being able to have a bank account and all this sort of thing, they were scorned, they were, ridiculed by other society, but they eventually got the vote, etc., etc. Well, possibly the same type of thing, the same dynamic and how it unfolded, probably happened with surfing as well, even though we weren't fighting to surf. We just, those of us who were those early years when we were the only ones doing it, we were probably seen as something special, and maybe young girls wanted to do it too,
Yes. Yeah.
Possibly for the wrong reasons, unfortunately some, but yeah, so in a way, yeah, we did lead the way.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful to see. I mean, we watched films like Girls Can't Surf last year, and how they got to a point in the internet. Sorry, I must just adjust this. They got to a point where they'd had enough of the male-dominated, very, as you put it earlier, chauvinistic view on female athletes. And so they had to take a stand, and they had to.
And they were damn brave, because even today, women are still afraid to not be sexy and not be the feminine ideal, and if you speak out at all, you still can get vilified and so on. And it takes a bit of guts to counter that, or to, take no notice of it. Yeah. Those girls were damn brave. Those
very brave.
Very brave.
Now you've kind of got a collective and a group coming together, to push it. Yeah. But back then there were just, a few, as you say, brave women who kind of really with a thorn in the side saying, hey.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'd put up with guys laughing at them and all this sort of horrible, absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
But you go to Muizenberg now, and it's more girls, more women surfing than guys.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the big stuff, but it doesn't matter. It's surfing. It's
one thing I noticed, because we had the fortune of being at the duct tape, the Vans duct tape, where I had a brief interaction with you. But I must just say that from a longboarding perspective, the discipline and the art of longboarding, women make it look so much more beautiful, I think, and give it such style, and the way in which they move on that board. It's a beautiful thing to see, and even more so than the men on the longboard is what I'm saying.
Yes.
And you've got to acknowledge that, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's longboarding, I think, is possibly more suitable for women than shortboarding is. But having said that,
Yes.
That's almost a chauvinistic type of reflection I'm making, because shortboarding is a lot more sort of aggressive in looks anyway, whereas longboarding is feminine. But I don't like to say that because you don't want non-longboarding men to make rude comments about men who longboard, you know.
Correct. Yeah, no, it's a bit of a sensitive subject these days as to how you.
Yeah, look,
But at the end of the day, I think those that understand who you are and who I am as personalities will understand what we're saying here.
Yeah.
And you got girls like Sophie Bell that I interviewed in J-Bay a couple of weeks ago, young South African charger out of Belito, and she is just fearless on that shortboard.
Amazing.
She was charging pipeline, like mixing it up at Nias in Indo, and she's just not afraid and to get in that pit and just stay in it.
No,
And
no, that's fantastic.
and that's the positive shards of light from those early days of struggle.
From an early type of bravery to that type of bravery.
Exactly.
And also, you know, there's this nature versus nurture thing. Young girls are allowed to be fearless more so now
Yes.
than back then. You know, I remember as a kid, I used to play with my brothers and his friends, and we used to ramp bicycles in the road and so on. But it wasn't encouraged.
Yes.
You know, it
Yeah.
was. I used to wear shorts and
Yeah. Mix it up with the boys.
mix it up completely. But it certainly wasn't encouraged. Whereas now, even though you still get Barbie dolls and you still get little girls in their little
Yes.
tutus and things, which is lovely.
Fine.
It's lovely. That's fine. But they're not made to feel that if they're not that way, they're inferior.
Here's something interesting. Do you know that back in the day, I did some research that, because pink is my favorite color, but back at the turn of the century, pink was actually
for boys.
for boys.
Yes.
Because it was perceived as a stronger color than blue.
Yeah, and blue, when you look at like the Mother Mary statue, she's always in a pale blue. Yeah.
What would you like?
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say that I haven't done any, like Tasha, for example, the work that she does is super. And I haven't, I'm afraid, but maybe in a casual way I sort of have. I don't know. I'm ashamed about that.
You don't have to be ashamed about it. I think that you've.
Shame, but I'm a lesser person for not having gone that way. It just hasn't worked out that way, you know. Yeah, something that's also that I'd like to talk about, that to encourage women, older women particularly, is the progression that you go through as an aging person, as an aging, you know, this is like my sunset years sort of thing. You don't have to give up because you can't do what you used to be able to do. You know, you see a lot of older people, men, not being able to bunny hop up onto their boards anymore. And then they feel discouraged and in the end they give up.
Yeah.
And I would sort of like to say you don't have to give up, even if you can't get onto jump up on your shortboard, if you can't paddle your longboard, go on a bodyboard, you know, still enjoy the ocean. Just accept that that's progression, that you no longer play with Lego, you no longer climb trees, you're no longer charging in some factory or, you know, crayfish factory, or adjust to, and I'd like to encourage women to go with the flow, to go with, you know, to age gracefully.
Yes.
But within surfing, you can continue.
Yeah.
Go for smaller waves if you're scared of bigger waves. Because when you get older, you do become quite fragile. I'll tell you, I'm like the Black Knight. This cut off, and then that's cut off, and the next thing's cut off, and I was thinking, keep going back.
Well, that's beautiful words and encouraging. If you're out in Muizenberg, you'll see Bernie with her helmet on, beautifully painted with flowers on her longboard. So you must give her a holler and a hoof and a peace sign.
Yeah.
But you know, what you were saying now, Bernie, is so true. Life is like chapters in a book. And if we think the next chapter is going to be the same as the last, well, that book isn't going to be very interesting.
Right. Yeah.
And it's and sometimes the next chapter might seem as if it's a negative chapter or a bad chapter because we can't do certain things that we could in the chapter before. It's only just a chapter, and this too often shall pass, and you move on to the next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, keep moving. I mean, keep moving as long as you can, in the way that you can, and just love. Your spirit doesn't change.
Yes.
Your physicality does.
Yes.
You've got to accept that.
Yep.
You can fight it to some extent,
Yep.
but you can't stop it.
You can put all the little filters on the Instagram to make you look younger.
Yeah, please do that.
But then when you eventually get to meet the person, you go like, oh, you don't look like the person on your Instagram account.
No, shame. That's another thing about social media is the false the falsehoods that
That's why
people
have stories like this. And that's why it's important to keep narratives like this alive and going.
real.
Real.
That are real. Yeah. Yeah, that's what Huey Thompson always says. Keep
That's
it real.
Bernie, Shelly, it's been an absolute treat. Hope this is one of a few conversations we can have. Bernie, Shelly, thank you very much for making time to come out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Love to have a hug on camera.
Of course. Lovely. And yeah, please remember to hit subscribe, hit like. Please ask them to do that.
Hit subscribe, hit like, and come back and like the next one and the next one and go back to the back ones. And
That's it.
those likes work well.
Legend.